In the last video, we did an overview of the estate assignments. In this screen, what we're going to do on this tutorial is we're going to look at what is actually added and the principal reasons why it's added, and then we're going to go through each one of the screens and kind of get an idea of what is actually in these screens and why they're used. Okay, when you start out with the application and you come from the main screen and the tutorials, I recommend what you do before you touch any of these screens and make any edits is to take the video tutorial for each screen in the order you're opening them. And in this particular case, this is going to be a fairly lengthy video because there's a lot to see and a lot to learn in this one screen. Okay, let's start adjusting what we're doing here. For example, the adjustments we're going to make in this screen is the estate owner is the person that is actually the one that is starting to add data for their information for all the advanced directives, all the assets, and everything that's related to giving the executor the capability to understand where everything is at, all the paperwork, all the banking, everything that has to do with estate planning and that they've done, and the things that you need to do in order to execute the executor responsibilities for taking care of all the issues that are required if there's a debt or something to be paid or an asset that's going to be bequeathed. All that stuff has to be in the application for the executor to be able to execute it properly. Now, in the last video, we talked a little bit about the keyboard screen, but I'm going to go into that for a little bit more. This particular set of icons here, the plus and the minus, they will add or delete a record. Do not use these. The reason for that is that I've included everything in the application that's required, and you should not be adding records where they're not supposed to be added. The only place you ever add a record in the application is where there's an Add New Record button. And for this application, we've made it very, very simple to understand. There's only one Add Record button on one main screen, and that screen is the one we're looking at right here, which is Estate Assignments. Now, we've already covered the other things over here in the last video, but what we're doing down here, if you leave this up on the screen or leave it up when it comes up for the video to be seen, you can click in if there's text in an area and sweep it and then copy and paste it someplace else if you want to. If you want to change the way the text looks, for example, if I come up here, I can pop up this right here and I could say select it, select all, paste something in, paste text only, and style. Now there's additional pop-ups that will come up depending on where you're working on the screen, but be aware that when you do that, for example, if I wanted to select all the text in here, I could select it. I could cut, copy, paste, delete, define it. Like in the case of that, it would be words that be defined. I can share it in an email. I can paste text only in there. And for example, if I wanted to paste text, and then I could change the style. For example, I can go in here, change the size, the color, the font, bold, italic, and underline. Be aware that bold, italic, and underline are also on the keyboard, so you can add them. And if you type text actually in there, let's go ahead and click done, you can actually change the text as well by, if I put something in there like owner, it kind of says what the next text item should be. It kind of knows what you might be putting in there, especially if you're typing in other areas where there's just narrative go in there. This line of text up here, for example, will say, for example, test owner will or I'm or something. Any of these words might be a choice. You click on it and it's going to add it to that field. Okay, on the iPhone, just so you know, you can have it read text. Say like there's a lot of narrative in here. If you click on the field and then highlight all the text you want to be read, it'll give you the ability to have the computer speak that text if you have your speak set up on your iPhone. So, and you can also, this is really nice and most people don't understand this, you can also dictate in here. The iPhone has the ability for you to speak to a text field, just click in it, and instead of using the actual keyboard, what you can do is you can either paste text in, text only or style, but you can also on the iPhone speak and it'll add the text into the line. So that saves you some time. Okay, let's go down through the fields. The estate owner address, in this case, you would put in like 515 North Pine Street, and then you put the city, state, zip, and whatever you want in that area. The reason I've done it this way is you can sweep or copy this and paste it into something. And I also recommend that you can use that if you wanted to paste it into another screen to have a mailer or label or something like that you can do. Same thing goes for on this side, same thing, but this time it's for the executor of the estate. The assignment date is the date that the person, the owner, assigned this responsibility to an executor. In this case, it would be your executor, and it would, when I click into it, I would type in the name of the person that is going to be the thing. It might be a lawyer, it might be an individual, it might be a relative or whatever, but that's the person that's going to see to executing your estate. You would put in your primary phone, other phone if you need one, and your email address and the owner's secondary email address, and then make any comments you want about your own, how to catch what times you're in or whatever you need to do for owner comments. And it's very similar over here for the executor. You want his phone number, his second phone number, and his email. You do not need 2 emails, but if you had to, you could always put one in this block down here. Okay, let's take a look at the first of the popover screens. Now, when you look at all these, they make a lot of sense. The estate has assets, a vehicle, a house, a motorcycle, TVs, whatever. You want to document all of those items and have a photo of them. The reason for this is you can track the value, and when it's sold, when you are down in the other screen where you might want to sell the assets that are in the house. And let's explain that. Typically, the owner might bequeath certain things in his will to individuals or whatever. If one of those people passes away or does not want what is being offered for whatever reason, you can reassign that within each item within the screen. And this could be a situation where if it's something about one person contesting somebody getting, say for example, a motorcycle, a car, or whatever, you can put the asset notes in here and start if it needs to be litigated for whatever reason, that information is very important. Who said what is the issue, and so forth. And obviously you know what the asset is because you can see it. The asset age is kind of critical in some respects. For example, if it's jewelry, is it estate jewelry, and it was maybe age was 25 years or 100 years or whatever, that might be very nominal as far as knowing what the value might be. Now, it's probably not necessary to have anybody take, say, like a piece of jewelry to a appraiser and have it appraised, unless the person, when they did their will, said that you could pay out of the assets that are available in cash or whatever to pay for an appraisal if it's required, because it may be sold and it might be a high value item, and they want you to understand that when it's sold, that you're selling it for a reasonable price, as far as if you took it to somebody in auction or whatever and you sold those items. If you wanted to see the individual record, you would click on the portal record, and what that's going to do is open to this screen where the information pops up in a larger scale so you can see everything on the screen. And obviously if you're typing and stuff like that, it might be a little simpler. The other reason is that some of these screens are set up so that it's quite easy to see things and stuff on an iPhone. Something like an iPhone 6 would see all of this across the top in landscape mode, and then you could scroll down and see the image at the bottom from your landscape mode. Okay, so let's go back to the main screen. Go back to see how you can go. One tap should take you to wherever you want to go in the application. And in this case, you'll be coming back to the screen quite often. But if you're using this and you're adding data, and this is very critical, as we are adding these records, this also scrolls. So if you add any data in here, like a secondary thing, it'll put the cursor in there. If you type anything in the field, it's going to add that record to that space. Click off of it, it puts it back so that it's not used yet. And like I said, you can scroll down to add as many records as you need to. If you're searching for something, as I said before, you can go to the individual record and then do a find for anything. Say, for example, you want to have a item that is, I don't know, say it's a ring or whatever in the description, and you want to find all the rings that are in there. You just put rings in here in the find, and it would find all those rings if you wrote out the description with that text in it. Okay, so let's go to the next screen. In this one, I only put test in all these because you can actually go in here and start one. It's got the basic record in there. And what you can do, for example, banking type. If this was a banking type, like a savings account, it was an IRA or whatever it might be, or maybe it's your general bank account, the executor needs to know where all the bank account information is on each account that you have, and anything you have for investments, like if you have an IRA account, well, where is that IRA account? And put that information in here. And if you have statements, put the statement location. Where are the statements? Are they in a drawer within the house? Where are they at? Are they on a computer or is a website that you have to go to? Well, you should have the password and username in here so the executor can actually find that. You could put the last balance you know of by popping this up and put the balance in that account for that specific account. Say you have $50,000. It makes sense to have that value in there so that when the executor is liquidating and getting statements, they can balance this out to make sure that that's the current balance. And if there's any money missing for one reason or another, it's very important for the executor to instigate an inspection to find out why anything would be missing. Once again, you can go to the portal, and you can see the portal information we passed over here, and this is where you would do your find if you had to. Start a find, perform the find. Then let's go back. See, it's easy to navigate through these. The next one is the estate business. Now, this is a business type of a situation where anything related to a business where either you own a business as the owner of the estate, or you have business relationships where you're a partial owner and you have some information about in here that you would need to put in about the value, like you're a partner, do you have partner sharing, is there insurance through your business, or anything else that's related to capital or assets or anything like that that are related to a business. Business name, business address, business notes, the phone for the business, email, the pending transaction, if there's any pending transactions as far as things that are, for example, checks or anything that's been written or whatever that they need to know about, the amount owed if you owe anything, the amount paid if you paid something on the business, and this will calculate a balance and it'll give you a final due. Now you can also use this if you're paying something or receiving something from a business. You can obviously see that if somebody owes you money from a business or you owe a business some money. For example, maybe you have something that you're paying on, and you have, say, like a motorcycle, and you want to put in the business name, the business address, put down here, I purchased a 1999 Eagle motorcycle, put the phone number, the email, the pending transaction information, and the amount you still owe on it, the amount you paid on it so far, and then get the balance, and then what the final due date would be for that particular item. And these all have these pop-ups, so you can go ahead and insert the date that you want to add in there. This is common throughout all these screens. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is estate distribution. That is exactly what it sounds like. If you have beneficiaries, you can go up here, click, and what it's going to do is going to go out, and I just added some samples. I put John Smith and Mary Smith in here, and I put that in the beneficiaries for the estates list, and then they will show back up over here. So if you wanted to make sure that all the people that might be receiving something from you and the will is going to be willed to them, that the beneficiary information is in this beneficiary estate, and of course you can pick them from that list and add them in there. This is what distribution method is being used. That would depend upon what the product or service or whatever it is that you're bequeathing to this person from the will. You would put that information in here, and that's for the owner of the will to figure out what they want this to be done. And this is where, when you're doing a distribution, the distribution is something that is actually included in the owners of the will and estate information that is going to be sent or sent to somebody or whatever. Date of the distribution, date of delivery. Now this is the date of the distribution. It could be different than the delivery. For example, say somebody had a car they were going to send to somebody and they wanted to be sent to them. Well, the distribution description would have to include the information in the notes and how it's supposed to be discerned as far as how it's packed and sent and whatever. It could be a package of, say, jewelry that you're going to send to his daughter or something like that. All that information needs to be discerned in here. And then the item photo. Now that would be, say for example, if it was a bag of stuff, you'd have to lay it all out and take pictures of it as to what actually was going out to the family member or the bequeath, whoever it is. Now, one of the things you want to make sure when you do that is to make sure that the picture is easy to see and understand as far as what was sent. And then, of course, the description up here would describe like a size 9 opal ring or something like that. You want to make sure that's all declared in there so that you, as the owner of the estate, put the information in so you're the person that is distributing and settling all the bequeathed items has the ability to do that. And once again, go to the portal. You can see the picture is going to be a little larger in the portal. The distribution information and all that will be quite easy to see in this area. Let's go back from the portal. Back in this case, we just did the distribution. Now we're going to documents. Now this is kind of an interesting thing. Let's go back to the correct place. Let's go to the main place here. Now let's go to distribution. We just did distribution. Let's go to documents. Now you know where we're at. This is a little statement in here that you can go ahead and overwrite when it comes in, but I wanted to point out that you have some interesting capabilities with this on the iPad and iPhone, and also if this is on the Mac, Windows, or whatever. This is actually a PDF document that was pasted in here. And what it did is when you clicked on the screen, it allows you to, on this screen, paste in the information that you want to. Like in this case, it says export it. Normally it will say add when there's not something in there, and you can add it. And you would be able to go out and add, in this case, a PDF or what it might be. In this case, that was a PDF that was added. Now, why is that so important that it's a PDF? Well, typically, if you just paste a graphic of some sort in there, let's go out of this and get out of here. When you just paste a graphic, it's a single page. With a PDF, if it's a multiple page document, for example, there may be the will is in here. You would put in, and I put test, the Apple service agreement is in here. I just pasted it in. If I wanted to view this, I could view it like this, and it actually allows me to go ahead on the iPad and read the entire document, and really in a big situation as far as being able to read it. Now if I pull down or tap up at the top of the screen, it'll bring this down, and when you get done reading it, you can send it back to the main screen. Over here, when you click on this, it's going to allow you, depending upon what you actually have on your iPad for ancillary applications, you can have all kinds of things pop up over here that allow you to put things on, and you can add them additional apps in here if you want to. In this case, you can mail this particular document, you can copy, print it, or more. More adds different options to do different things over here. So that's just a nice little thing to know that it can do. Say done, and you'll come back to this screen. Now in the portal, it does much the same, only it's a larger view in the portal. And of course, you can do a find up here if you want to find anything, like you're looking for a particular document. Maybe the document is a something that gives rights to you as an executor to do a certain thing, like a health agreement, or something that you say, for example, the person has not passed away and they're in the hospital, and maybe there's an issue where their mental health is not adequate, or there's a medical health care power of attorney that the executor would have to find, and that's something that you would want to have pasted into here. If you were at the hospital and you had to look it up or whatever, you could pop into here and say view it, and you could view it and read it. If you needed to show it to somebody like the doctor or somebody, administrative people in the hospital, that would be one thing that you want to do. Same thing with a will. Say, for example, it's a living will and or a healthcare power of attorney or a pre-healthcare facility medical care directive or any other advanced directives. They could all be in this screen area. This makes it quite simple as well, too. If for some reason a piece of paper needs to be reproduced or like that, you can always go in, and then you can say, instead of export, you can go in here and say print or send it in an email, attach it to an email. You can do that. Now, if you put a simple image of one page in there, it will allow you to also do the same thing where you can print it or send it as a PDF in an email or send it in an email if you had to send it somewhere. What this is really nice about, if you go to the bank and you have, say for example, an authorization for the executor to access the bank vault, say like for example if there's a security box where you have stuff in the box, you would have to have a signature for that. And that's one of the important things that should be in here is the paper that was signed is a copy of the signing agreement to allow you to access anything in the bank. Same things go for if you have paperwork for, say, for a vehicle that was purchased, motorcycle, whatever, all that paperwork that would have to be used in order to go to a particular location, say for example a bank where you're going to sell a vehicle and you have the paperwork for that vehicle, or say for example a department motor vehicle needs that information, you have it on your iPad and you can take it in and actually print a copy or email it at the location directly to them. So this helps you to manage information in a way you wouldn't even imagine, especially if it's on here and say for example for some reason those paper items get destroyed. Maybe this person was smoking in bed and he fell asleep and got burned up and his room was all burned up and all the paperwork was lost. If he has this application, now he can have all that paperwork. He could send you or have that available to you, or he can print it again or have it printed by somebody to put it in a different location, or email this to, say, for example, family members or to the executor. He could email them. So if something ever happened in the home and something was robbed or stolen or burned or whatever, they would have copies of these. Okay, so let's go back, and we're going to go back into the estate again. And that was documents. Now insurance. This is pretty straight up forward. Do you have life insurance? Do you have a something that will pay dividends or anything like that? It has to do with insurance. For example, most people have maybe a life insurance policy that also may have a distribution in it or whatever, and maybe you have to figure out how that is supposed to be distributed. If it came down to the death of the owner, it may be going to a grandson or a daughter or somebody. But for some reason, if there's some reasons to change that or edit it for whatever reason, that information needs to be put in here. And this is very important for the person who owns the estate to make sure that everything plus alternatives are included in here. For example, in this case, we're looking at the type of insurance, the insurance company address, the policy start date, the policy terms as far as what is the effective terms of that particular estate insurance, the policy notes that you want to take about what you may have to do to, like for example, take a death certificate and make sure that this is information goes to the beneficiary or beneficiaries for that particular insurance policy, the insurance company name, an email to them, the agent at the company where you contacted and talked to them, a policy number, a policy end date. In other words, this may have an end date. If this is a life insurance where it has a end of a term, you need to make sure that you get into the insurance company right away as an executor and make sure that they have the death certificate, so whoever the beneficiary receives the benefits that the will creator wanted them to have. And then the policy payment, if this is an ongoing payment where they paid in a certain amount, what was the monthly payment that they were making to that? Or did they pay it off in full? If it's paid off in full and it's just going to come back, the owner of the estate should put that information in here. Okay, that's quite involved. Let's go to the portal again like we did before, and we see the type of insurance, and all that information is in the individual portal where you can do a find on it. And obviously if you wanted to see ID number 1 and then all the policies for it, you could go ahead and go through each one that was by ID for that owner's estate. Let's go back to the main area, and we're into medical. Now this is a little difficult to work through unless the owner of the estate has helped you with all the information. In this particular case, you would have to have the doctor's name, the organization that doctor is part of, the doctor's pending bill balance, if there is a bill balance. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting. If you're doing medical notes, you need to make sure that if there has been a recent thing, or for example, maybe the person who is the owner had passed away and there were bills outstanding, that means you need to figure out how those medical bills are going to be satisfied and where the money's going to be coming from. So it's important for the owner of the estate to put in medical notes about the actual procedures and whatever that may be pending to be paid, and what was the treatment date and the last treatment date. And then this is for each individual doctor, each individual treatment. So you may have a little bit of work to put them all in. And this is basically for anything that has a balance to it. And then the treatment provided. If for some reason the doctor gave a treatment and was giving the owner of the estate some kind of narcotics or anything like that that could have caused the death, you want to make sure that those notes are taken. And there may be something where the estate will sue the doctor if that was the cause, or say there was malpractice or whatever, according to what you feel. That information based on that treatment on that day may nullify any cost and may even end up with a lawsuit against the doctor. Things like that happen, and you have to understand that you need to keep the information. People do not have good memories when it comes to the tiny details, and this application, if it's used properly, will do all that for you. Funeral arrangements. Funeral arrangements in this particular case, it would be the location of the funeral, the date, the time, and the funeral home, and the funeral costs. Now, this is quite critical. Some people pay ahead for their casket or cremation, and that information needs to be in here as far as cost and information. And the funeral arrangements and the speakers. If people are going to be at the funeral and you're organizing it as the executor, you're going to want to know who spoke, because you may want to send out a letter to them or a thank you or whatever. You want to put those in, and people that actually made any statements about anything at the funeral, that might be important. And then the funeral arrangements. If there is a company and the owner of the estate says, I have flowers going to be coming in, I'm going to have a food thing, there's going to be a reception after, and that's going to be paid for when, the estate is set up to pay for that, whatever it might be. And so you want to make sure that that is covered. And you might want to put a limit of how many people, say like it's a smorgasbord kind of a thing, and you have a lot of food. You're going to want to say that it's for 50 people or 10 people or whatever it might be. Or they may just leave some money to take 2 or 3 people out to dinner or whatever it might be. And that might be something the executor needs to make sure happens. Now the mailing list, I'm going to explain what this is. There's 2 ways this is used. This is going to take the beneficiaries and put them on a mailing list. Okay, let's take a look at that. As you add the beneficiaries in the beneficiary file, it's going to automatically add them to here. This gives you an ability to scan through, and there's a beneficiary email. What this is if people are going to go to the funeral or whatever, you want to contact them by emailing a request to let you know whether they're coming or not. So what you'd want to do is, yes, they're coming, or no, they're not coming. And that's by the individual people. It has their address, their phone number, and their second phone number if you want to call them and find out. But if they're going to go ahead and the beneficiary email, if you needed to figure out, say for example, John Smith, it's going to shift over to the beneficiary screen, and information that's in here is collected, and you can add contact notes based on, have you contacted them and the issues that you might be having with that particular person. So it's very important to track down these people and make sure who's coming, who's not coming. And then of course that affects a lot of things, because if you're reading the will, and the will has things in there for people, and you would need to read the will because it's important. Maybe the home is split between 2 or 3 people in the family. You want to have all 2 or 3 people there for this reading. So you want to make sure and emphasize to them that you've contacted John and maybe Mary and the other person. And somebody might say, look, I don't want anything to do with that home, or maybe I want the whole thing, it's mine. He said he would give it to me. And if you're reading the will, you say, well, let's read the will. You need to be here for reading of the will. So those are the kind of things. And of course, comments to that effect for the beneficiary statement might say, for example, it may be 50-50. The home is going to be distributed as a 50-50 thing, and they have to work out themselves how they're going to, for example, are they going to sell the house? Are they going to rent it out, lease it out, or keep it, or live in it? All that stuff has to be decided. And it's helpful if you, as the owner of your estate, put that kind of stuff in there with whatever you feel needs to be added to it. Okay, so let's go back. And we're going back to the next thing. We did the The list, now the executor expenses, pretty straightforward. Each time the executor has a fee that is required to be collected, something that needs to be paid, or something that that particular person has as the executor, a cost to them. Say, for example, he lived 2,000 miles away and he had to fly to do the executor thing. That amount of that expense, who it was paid to, the date it was paid, the business name it was paid to, and the type of expense. In this case, it'd be air transportation, or the person drove and they want to be reimbursed for all those costs out of the proceeds from the estate. Now, obviously, if there's no proceeds from the estate, you're doing this as a grant and you're doing it for nothing. So business notes, this might be something, for example, I flew on flight 402 to such and so on this date, and I'm going to be flying back on this flight, and this is what it cost. So was it pending balance on it? Was it paid? Well, this really depends on how the estate is distributed. As the executor of the estate, this is stuff that occurs after the death of the owner of the estate. These are expenses that need to be deducted from the balance of accounts and whatever statements and balance of monies or whatever that is left over. Now, sometimes the owner of the estate might say, I will set aside $5,000 for everything. Well, obviously, you'd want to stay within that budget and make a note that you're limited to $5,000. And each one of these items that you're looking at here, you might want to say that you want to keep it within that $5,000 balance, or you're taking it out of your own pocket. So that's important for you to understand that. Okay, we just did beneficiary, but let's go ahead and look at it again really quickly. The beneficiary for the estate is the actual name of the beneficiary, their address, their phone, phone to, email, email to, and the contact date was shared across different screens, and the shared contact notes will be shared across the screens. So if you come to here or you go to the actual portal for that, you'll see that that's the information. And as we stated before, you can still use this to go ahead and do a search for family members, or use it for all the beneficiaries from a particular beneficiary account. Okay, so let's go back again. We're just looping around here. The next one is we did the beneficiaries. Now, life estate management. What this is really about is a little different. A life estate requires certain documents that may be probated or not being probated. If say, for example, if it is a life estate and all the proper paperwork is done and it's packaged and ready to go, well, the forms for each one of those need to be identified. So, for example, a living will would be the first thing. For example, maybe this is the living will. The form name, if you went and got a living will form, that name of that form. If it was done on a software package and it's on somebody's computer, you need to know the software location and how to get to it. It needs to have a password, if it's got a password on it, included in here. If it's been filed, when was it filed? It could be years ago, it could be yesterday, depending on the person. Where was it filed? Was it filed with the county? Was it filed in the city? How was it filed, so somebody knows where to find it if they have to? In this particular case, if it's a document, for example, like a living will, who created it? Was it your personal thing you created with a software package, or was it done by a lawyer? If a lawyer was used, what's his name? What's his address, phone number, email? The trust name. If it's a trust, what is the name of that trust? Or where is that trust information included? For example, if it's a trust name and it's not the same as a living will, but it's a part of a package, then you need to have that trust name. The trust document location, where is that document? If it was filed with the county or filed with the city or somebody, what is the filing and where is it at? Those are very simple things to add, but it's critical for the executor to do his job to know where those are all at. If it's an individual thing like the life estate, go ahead and make a picture file of it. If it's a PDF, drop it in the PDF file so that you have that document and information. Jumping over to the portal, same information, only a little easier to see. And for example, if we go back over here, it's a very thing like you did before. You can pop up and see the actual item and say done. And you could read it if you needed to in here. But it should be, in this case, it's a document image of a trust item that should also, obviously, be included in the documents file. Large view gives you the ability to see it a little easier. And you can say view it again, and it'll be a larger view of that item if it was a whole piece of paper or whatever. Okay, so let's go back We're almost getting through the entire application in this way. We've completed all these popovers. That is the application, and shows you how to get to the individual screens where you enter data. And I want to point out again, and I pointed out in the last video, this is where you add, edit, and change things. You can, after you create an individual record, edit it in a portal, but in most cases you probably want to edit it in this screen so it's easy to get to. Okay, the last thing we're going to be looking at, which almost completes the application, there are a bunch of list views, assignment list view that are related to all these, where they list all of the records for everything within the database. For example, if I go to assignment list view, if there were 6, 10, 100 different people that actually had estates in here, they'd all be listed. So this thing might be something that's used commercial as an application, where somebody that actually does executorships for different people and does their work for it and keeps doing all those, they would have all this information available in here. If you click on show, it's going to take you to that particular screen where that information is at. For example, now if I go down and go to the bottom again, you're going to see very similarly the list view for the banking. There's only one test record in there. I can go back and go back to the assignments, and again back down to specials. You would have one for distribution, documents, insurance, medical, beneficiary. These are all list views where it'll list everything that's in all those individual records, making it easier to go down the screen and pick out the individual thing that you're looking for. For example, if there was all the beneficiaries were listed and you wanted to go to one record, it might even be easier than doing a find just to go to this list view and just pick the person you want, or doing a find if there's a lot of people and go directly to that record to find it and from the list view and show it. The last thing we're covering, and I can't believe we can get a whole application done in about 4 or 5 videos, but the asset report. What this is, you did a list of all the assets. This is extremely helpful if, for example, you have an estate sale or you're selling the house or whatever. You've created the assets in the first screen. It lists the owner's estate, the description, so that you're working with the correct owner. If you have multiple owners, you would go ahead and first of all do a find for the owner name, and then it says, I just put test asset, type of asset, description. This comes from the asset screen. The difference is here that there is by the way, there's a location where the item is at, but there's also a list, a drop down, and how this thing may have been distributed or sold or whatever. It was willed to, donated, gifted, sold, or for sale, or it's trashed. If there's stuff, for example, in the estate that has no value to it and you have to dispose of it, then you would put in there for that item. Or items, for example, maybe there was a series of chairs that you try to get rid of and you couldn't get rid of them, and now you just trashed them, and you just say, for example, 5 chairs that were not sold or distributed or whatever, you can go ahead and destroy those. The asset value is something you put in the asset, but here's the nice part, the asset was sold at. Now it's going to do a itemized look for a sub summary for the records that are in selection. So if you picked owner number 1 with the ID number 1, all the items would be calculated and summarized. So you can see the entire value of all the assets at the value, and then you can see everything that was sold, and you can see the sub summary for that, and then the grand summary of all the items. Sub summaries end up under each record, and these end up at the very end of the report that summarizes all of these items and then puts a grand total at the end of the report. This is a place where if there's ever anything that is in question from the executor or one of the bequeathed about what was sold, what was not sold, what was thrown out and all that, this is an exacting record of everything and how it was distributed or benefited to the individuals that are in the will. So it's very important to understand. If you go in here and you open up the screen and it doesn't have the headers, just go ahead and click on Run Report, and it'll add those headers up here, like the description of the item, and then all the rest of the information about that item. And there's a little thumbnail that shows you the item as far as the picture is concerned, and this came from the asset screen. So it's very easy to look at these items and go down and you'll see all the pictures for all the items. So if you have an estate sale and you actually sell it, you can just go right to the item. You can do a find if you had to, if there's thousands of items, and just put in what it was sold for. And if it's the house itself, obviously you're going to have to do a lot of other legwork and calculations and stuff like that, but not that difficult to do when you have all the information included in the application. Okay, let's kind of close out and cover what we've done here. We went to the main screen. We did all the things as far as looking at all the videos and learned how to use them and learned how to use the application. We've gone through all the different screens and all the portal screens. We've gone to the main screen, which is the estate. We filled in the basic information for assignments, and we've gone through each one of the screens where information will be added and the list views that are included in the application. The only thing we didn't recover is on the main screen. There is the estate references, which is in one of the other videos, but it basically goes in, and I'll repeat it. There are a number of different things that you can add or look up information in here as far as the will or whatever it is that you need to understand. And don't hesitate to add additional websites in here if you find stuff that is linked off to another website where the information is even better. Maybe if you're going to have a will done by a lawyer, you can look up the local lawyers in the area and see which one you prefer and call them and contact them and do that if you're the owner of the estate. And that way it helps the executor who's going to be managing that information to know where everybody's at and how it was done. And you might even want to make a note you found them on that particular website that you added. Remember, these do require an internet connection. Okay, so let's close by saying this. If you have questions or you need assistance, it's always free. So what you want to do is contact us through our website at ontargetsolutions, all one word, .biz. And that's http:// and I want to point out one last thing over here. There are two things that you need to know about this screen. In order for the links to work, you have to ensure that you have the http:// and the last two forward slashes, or that particular link will not work. So if you just typed something in here, you need to include the http:// or that link will not work. Okay, I'm happy to help anybody that needs assistance. And thank you for purchasing the application, and I hope it does a real good job for you. Thank you.